What's up, chat? So basically, it took me a while, but I finally watched Dune, and it was amazing. Start to finish, I watched Dune. It was amazing. If part two is as good as part one, I might even say they're better than Lord of the Rings. But this is a little recap of part one, so I get ready to watch part two.
Novel, a stunning film with deeper layers of meaning and such astute attention to detail that you leave this movie with a spice contact high. I loved Dune, and I am gonna break it down scene by scene to explain some details that you might have missed, some broader context from the novel, and the filmmaking elements worthy of appreciation. The film opens cold, even before the studio title card, so when you're watching this in the theater, you're like, is the movie starting? With this quote. Now, this quote is actually not from Herbert's novel, but a line added by Villeneuve to frame part one of this story as one about the power of dreams. For Paul Atreides, they're messages from the deep within his subconscious, hinting at his destined path as a chosen one, but also physically from the deep, from the Shai-Hulud sandworms of Arrakis, with whom Paul attains a spiritual connection by the movie's end, suggesting these dreams may be their siren call to beckon Paul deeper into the deserts of Dune. But as we learn in the final act, the prophetic accuracy of these dreams is really called into question, empowering Paul with the choice to forge his own destiny. Now, this deep voice is a man speaking Sardaukar, the language of the elite commandos of the Emperor. The Sardaukar's army's chants use throat singing, known for a Mongolian as well as Tibetan and Northern European traditions. We meet them a bit later. But then guiding us through the prologue is the voice of Chani, the freeman woman of Paul's dreams, as she describes Arrakis.
Rolling over the sands. You can see spice.
Like this shit had me locked in. Like I felt like we was going into Riddick mode, bro. It felt like Riddick. The talking in the background, the narration, fire.
Hans Zimmer's percussion beats steadily, evoking the thumper device, which redirects the sandworms with the sound of a beating heart. And we learn about spice, aka melange. This is a precious natural resource of this whole universe. It's found only on the planet Arrakis, aka Dune. In Frank Herbert's novel, it was really an analog for Middle Eastern oil. Here, Villeneuve shows it as glitter dust, a kind of magic. Like imagine a place where this precious gold just blows around on the ground. Now the film only somewhat goes into it, but spice is really a powerful drug that enables interstellar travel and commerce, but not as fuel. This is a product that's consumed by guild navigators, who are genetically engineered beings who use melange to enhance their minds to rapidly compute complex navigation equations. And this society needs this because they passed Butlerian jihad against thinking machines, aka computers or AI. But what I love about this movie is that it doesn't bog things down too much on this literary backstory and just kind of sticks to the exposition that Paul Atreides needs on his journey. And yes, by the way, the whole desert planet setting, spice as a drug, mystical psychic powers, and an emperor.
I said that, bro.
World details.
I said it looked like Tatooine, or whichever one it was.
That George Lucas took for his Star Wars universe after reading Herbert's 1965 novel. Dune came first.
Again, it's like
what? Dune came first? Ooh.
So if they rhyme.
Chani details their oppression by the Harkonnens, and then the Harkonnens ordered departure.
Why did the Emperor choose this path? And who will our next oppressors be?
Contextualizing this whole prologue is really Chani's dream message to Paul Atreides, and leaving us with the question of the cycle of oppression. See, Herbert's texts go further into how religious radicalism can begin as a noble cause, but eventually becomes its own evil when the oppressed become the next oppressors. And yes, Villeneuve opens with part one in the title to signal to viewers that, like the Fellowship of the Ring, this is really part one of a longer narrative, and to not expect definitive finality by the end of the movie. It lists the year as 10,191, but to be clear, that is 10,191 AG after Guild, referring to the point that the Spacing Guild was formed and monopolized space travel and banking, and that year was believed to be in our calendar around 11,000 AD, so these events are set close to 22,000 AD in our time. Paul eats breakfast with his mother, Lady Jessica, a concubine of the Duke Leto Atreides, and she is a nun with the Bene Gesserit Order, a group of sorceress nuns who have spent centuries running a secret breeding program to bring about their prophesied messiah, Kwisatz Haderach. Villeneuve adds a new scene that's not in the novel to show their use of the telepathic voice.
Give me the water.
I
And it's
love
crazy
the
'cause it
editing
sounds
here.
like that
As
old
Paul
lady.
focuses on his mother, the light shifts on the portrait. This is actually Paul's grandfather, Leto's father, Paulus, known for bullfighting, thus his matador red cloak and that table statue. House Atreides is one of the noble families who can actually trace their lineage back to Earth and the people of Greece. And in Greek myth, fighting the Cretan bull was one of the labors of Heracles, and the Minotaur was, of course, part bull. Meanwhile, the rival house Harkonnen gets their name from Harkonnen, a Finnish surname that's derived from the word harka, translating to bull. So a bit of foreshadowing with the fate of Leto at the horns of the bull, which Leto does again at his father's gravestone,
Okay.
depicting that bullfight.
And grandfather fought bulls for sport.
Yes. Look where that got him.
But while he uses the voice, Paul moves his lips, but the only sound we hear initially are thumper beats, and then another voice comes in a bit delayed, and it's distorted in this creepy demonic snarl, showing how it's channeled from some external force.
Give me the water.
And then Jessica
Yeah,
moves the
sounds
glass
like the
and
lady.
then opens her eyes, signaling that she did this unconsciously. I mean, folks, nothing against Star Wars, but this is a far more visceral depiction than the way the Jedi used the Force, which, yeah, George Lucas got pretty much from the voice in Dune. The Emperor's Herald arrives.
How much will it cost them? Traveling all this way for this formality.
3 guild navigators, a total of 1.46 million, 62
I
salaries.
peeped you was doing
Yes,
calculations
this
when
is
you did
Thufir
that.
Hawat, the Mentat of House Atreides. Mentats are advisors trained to perform rapid mental analysis to replace computers of this world. And this little moment shows both the Mentat's function and the Duke's wariness over the Emperor's excess in sending this herald. The Emperor is making the Duke an offer he can't refuse. Paul greets Duncan Idaho, a pilot and swordmaster.
Stabilizers are too loose.
Could see this as a little detail forewarning the loose stabilizer wings Paul will have to deal with while piloting his ornithopter later on in the sandstorm. And Paul mentions his dream vision of Duncan's death.
Felt like if I had been there, you'd be alive.
And yes, there's this close-up of a desert beetle, which Duncan later plays with right before the starter car arrived to kill him. Gurney Halleck mentors Paul.
Don't stand with your back to the door.
Tell us you by your footsteps, Gurney Halleck.
Someone might imitate my stride.
I know the difference.
Later on, Paul will repeat these words to Gurney when he rescues him from the sandworm.
Recognize your footsteps, old man.
And if you think about it, the worms also hear their footsteps, necessitating the thumper to imitate their stride. But Paul, with his mystical linkage with the sandworms, would know the difference. Now, during their sparring, they use these shields that glow blue when rapid strikes hit them, but glow red to show slower strikes penetrating them. Now, in the books, these are called Holtzman generators, which prevent the use of laser gun beams, because a generator being hit with a beam could trigger a nuclear explosion that would kill everyone in the vicinity. So instead, in this world, blades are used in close combat. And you'll notice throughout this movie, they use a combat style of swift blows, but as they come in for the kill, slower strikes, moving at a speed of 6 to 9 centimeters per second, because that's how slow you have to move to penetrate the shield. And we meet Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, morbidly obese, who uses anti-gravity suspensors on his back to float and stay upright. Now, spoiler warning for the Prelude to Dune prequel series and potentially for part 2 of this film, but this obesity was actually a disease cursed upon him by the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit, who manipulated the Baron, who's actually homosexual, into having sex with him and collecting his genetic material to produce an offspring, that offspring being Lady Jessica, as a whole part of their breeding program to produce their Messiah. And then, enraged, the Baron raped the Reverend Mother, so in retribution, she cursed him. Now, we will see if this ends up being the backstory in the films, but it is hinted at by the Reverend Mother snapping at Lady Jessica for wasting their efforts on a male heir.
So much potential wasted in a male. We were told to bear only daughters.
And hinted at by the Baron calling Duke Leto cousin.
You have a wonderful pixie cousin.
But here, the Baron runs his hand across his bald head, which has got to be an homage to Marlon Brando's gesture as Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, whose infamous exterminate them all order, the Baron actually alludes to later.
Kill them all.
Now, the interstellar travel is depicted in this movie with these massive tubular structures in orbit, through which, on the other side, you can see another planet, making this a kind of wormhole portal through space. And then, as Paul walks up to the Gom Jabbar test, he tugs at his neck collar on his left side, his nerves already tingling from the needle that will soon threaten the spot. Jessica speaks to Paul and Dr. Yue with sign language. This is called battle language in the books, and it's hand signals used to prevent enemies from intercepting messages. Here, it's a way of telling Paul that he needs to keep his guard up. The Reverend Mother uses the voice on Paul, and it is super effective.
Come here. Kneel.
I love it. From Paul's perspective, there's this unfocused pull into darkness, and again, great editing because he travels the full length of the room in an instant before we even realize what just happened. Now, we never see what is in the box, leaving it to Timothée Chalamet to express the pain inside, as well as, again, some great editing. They intercut the burning palm trees of Arrakis, as in the book, this pain is described as Paul's flesh feeling like it is burning off. Meanwhile, outside, Jessica chants this prayer.
You must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings obliteration. And I face my fear, no permit to pass over me. The struggling mind has come, but it's no time the rising path. And where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
Yes, this is the most famous passage from Herbert's Dune, a phrase that echoes in Paul's mind during this sequence. And specifically the words, turn the inner eye, in this context foreshadows Paul facing the Shai Hulud. Its mouth designed to look like a giant eye that Paul gazes into as he faces his fear. And the music is amazing throughout this film, composed by Hans Zimmer, and here you hear this fierce female vocal. This is singer Lori Kotler, who in this case is singing a made-up language that sounds like it is based at least partially on Hebrew. Now, as they arrive on Arrakis, I love the contrasting design of the Atreides fleet. It's angular, blocky ships, which is also reflected in their chunky armor, compared to the fleet of House Harkonnen, which is more rounded and bulbous, like the Baron and his nephew Rabban themselves. House Atreides arrives on Arrakis, where the local Fremen identify Paul as Lisan al-Gaib.
It's their name for Messiah. It means the Bene Gesserit have been at work here.
Planting superstitions.
Preparing the way, Paul.
You see what they've been told to see?
Yeah, Paul is annoyed how the Bene Gesserit was manipulating the Fremen religion this way, but in reality, he too is seeing what he has been told to see. His dream visions are not going to always match up with the truth. Now, we all know we should be saving money and investing it. Beyond diamond handing my Animorphs novel collection, I don't have much of an investing strategy. That's why we're excited to partner with this of investment ETFs, Publish, Doge, your trade our zoo names, New Rock with domain in the militaristic hum of real-life Apache helicopters, and they arrive at the city of Arrakeen, and the immensity of the palace is hinted at with
like
these
Coruscant.
big piles of sand that have collected on all the slope surfaces. Gurney observes the multiple moons of Arrakis, the larger one, Kreln, referred to as the Hand of God for the canyon that looks like a hand. The production designers actually used as a reference point a real-life canyon pattern on the surface of Mars. That's called the Valles Marineris. Then a hunter-seeker burrows into Paul's bedroom, operated by an assassin hidden in the walls of the palace still, which is terrifying. Paul uses a projected educational video to hide in the brush, showing how, in a way, kind of like the rhythmic walking in the desert to avoid the sandworms, Paul is beginning to adapt to Arrakis' survival instincts. And he notices this kangaroo mouse in the shrubbery. This is actually called the Muad'Dib, and we see one of these later on in the movie in close-up and how it collects moisture in its adorable little ears, showing how it's perfectly adapted to this desert climate. Now, Muad'Dib is hugely significant to Paul's journey. It's also the name that the Fremen give that larger moon with the Hand of God, and the name that Paul goes on to take when he's among the Fremen. So yeah, this connection with the mouse is hugely significant as we are looking ahead to part 2. Meanwhile, the Baron keeps this terrifying spider pet with human hands. This ain't in the book, folks, but it might be to replace the even creepier pets the Baron keeps in the book, which is just young boys. But I'm wondering if this could be a freak genetic experiment from the Bene Teliacs. But there are some fan theories out there that this could be Dr. Yue's wife, based off of what he said later.
They take her apart like a doll.
Yeah, I don't know about that. At least I hope for her sake that's not the case. Fremen leader Stilgar greets them and they exchange the dignity of spitting at each other, giving each other the gift of moisture. But this moment actually reframes the earlier exchange between Paul and his mother. Give me the water, as a deeper pledge to help each other survive in the desert. When Hawat shows them the spice silos, notice how there are far fewer of them than when we saw in the opening prologue, the fully stocked silos when the Harkonnens were running things. This could be a little clue showing how the Harkonnens took out a lot of their equipment so that it wouldn't get damaged when they returned to bomb the city. We meet Imperial ecologist Dr. Liet Kynes, who equips them with the Fremen still suits that recycle water from the body's sweat and other moisture to keep you rehydrated. And then out in the desert, the carry-all malfunctions, so they have to evac the harvester crew, but a dust cloud kicked up by the surfacing worm billows over Paul, and Spice puts him in this trance. Yeah, we hear that demon voice again whispering to Paul, identifying him as the Bene Gesserit Messiah, with the melange and the Shai Hulud as that message from the deep calling to him. The harvester gets devoured by the Shai Hulud, first seen only by its outer mouth, with these outer teeth as these long strands, much like the baleen of a whale, that, like in the case of the whale, is designed to filter out the elements that would get sucked in. I gotta say, it's a beautiful sight, almost like nature reclaiming what rightfully belongs to it. Now later, Paul explains to his mother that he saw a vision of his death at the hands of Chani, who's using a crysknife, another example of how his visions might not be exact prophecies. They give disputing interpretations of the future. He also foresees Jessica's pregnancy and her giving birth to his sister Alia, who will play a major role in part 2 of this story. Now, on Seleucia Secunda's, the Sardaukar prepare for deployment, anointed with blood, and you can see that they get this by draining it from rows of other men that are pinned upside down. In the books, Sardaukar do have various secret rituals, but here it seems like a Spartan ritual to drain the life force from the weaker candidates who don't make the cut to empower the warriors who do. And so the assault on Arrakeen begins.
Damn.
And thanks to the betrayal of the tragic Dr. Yue, the shields get lowered and the
And they
city of
still
Arrakeen gets
killed
bombed.
you.
As Gurney leads men to one of the
They
ships,
still
it
killed
goes
Dr. Yue.
boom boom, and we see some wonderful scale in this film with Gurney's men in the lower left corner of frame as you see a piece of fuselage blowing it past them. Now we do not see Gurney's fate in this movie. This guy's gonna return in part 2. Don't worry, Thanos ain't going nowhere. Duncan fights his way through the palace, and at one point he uses anti-gravity suspensors, just like the ones in Baron's back, to levitate and knee that Sardaukar. And then on the Thopter, Jessica spots a frem kit beneath Paul's seat with that diamond marking. And then later in the tent, they find a note with the same diamond. This is a symbol on Dr. Yue's forehead. And this comes from the Sook Inner School, where these tattoos signal that these doctors cannot fully betray their patients and violate their oath to do no harm, which is probably how Dr. Yue was able to justify this betrayal, by giving the Duke the poisoned tooth, and by giving Jessica and Paul this gear to help them. The Baron taunts the Duke.
Your son is dead, your concubine is dead. Tonight the house of our trade is full.
Oscar Isaac has to play paralyzed, but he sheds a single tear to convey all of his grief. He crushes the poisoned tooth that Dr. Yue gave him, and the editing delays this reveal of the final gift from Dr. Yue to Paul until after the death, and we learn that it is his father's Atreides ring. So Paul and Jessica find out right as we do. Now Spice wafts into the tent, and Paul experiences another vision, a future holy war led by himself and other Fremen warriors in earth-tone armor cutting through the Sardaukar, as behind him a Shai Hulud burst out of the sand. But then this vision extends further into the future, showing Fremen conquering his home planet of Caladan, as he and Chani, blue-eyed Fremen, gazing down upon this.
I see a holy war spreading across the universe like unquenchable fire. A warrior religion that waves the Atreides banner in my father's name. Fanatical legions worshipping at the shrine of my father's skull.
Now, this future does get explored further in Herbert's text, the way religious fanaticism becomes its own form of oppression. But notice how in this vision, Jamis joins them, so again, this could be a malleable future we're looking at. They're recovered by Duncan and Dr. Kynes, who take them to a Fremen outpost at an old ecological station designed to terraform Arrakis to pull the water up out of the sand, but this whole project was abandoned since Spice was discovered, and Paul suggests making a play for the Emperor's throne by offering to marry his daughter, a plot point that we will see in part 2, where the Emperor will finally be revealed. But the Sardaukar catch up with them, and Duncan has to fight so that they can escape. Dr. Kynes uses a thumper to draw in the Shai Hulud, and she draws out these hooks for her to ride this thing. I love how the worm kicks up the dunes like a crashing tsunami toward her, making her a sort of surfer, waiting for the right wave to come in. But unfortunately, she is stabbed by a Sardaukar, spurting water from the still suit the way blood would, but here water is essentially their blood, and she pounds the sand to beckon the Shai Hulud to deliver them all. Then in the sandstorm, Paul experiences a vision of Jamis as a mentor to him.
We must move with the flow of the process.
Yeah.
We must join it. We must flow with it.
And this is all part of some future lesson.
Yeah, I took it as James? I took it as he said, I'm gonna have to teach you about the desert, whatever. And his first lesson was having to kill him.
That he'll learn from Jamis on how to ride the Shai Hulud that he applies to his current crisis. Just go with the flow. And this is fascinating because this person never becomes his mentor. Well, he is kind of a mentor in a way, but they're never actually friends in reality. This is what Lady Jessica meant by Paul becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. By uniting all times, Paul uses one possible future to help him survive the present. And so they crash land the Thopter, chained into still suits, and then initially walk through a canyon that Paul recognizes from his dream of Duncan, Duncan among the Fremen. Another vision shows him and Chani finding a little cute Muad'Dib.
Don't be frightened. Even a little desert mouse can survive. You'll need to face your fears. A friend will help you. Follow the friend.
But this time the voice is purely that of the external mystic speaker, meaning that Paul is closer and closer to grasping his dream, except that helpful friend is not gonna be Jamis, but Chani, which is why her voice takes over that voice of the speaker. A sandworm chases them down and gives us our first real close-up look at the full anatomy of the Shai-Hulud. It looks awesome, and then Paul looks deep into it, past its outer mouths to its two inner mouths, which click at him almost in an endearing way, as if it recognizes him, respects him. Stilgar's group finds them. Jessica manages to disarm Stilgar, leading to Jamis having to evoke the Amtal challenge, to which Paul steps up as Jessica's champion. But before the duel, Paul once more hears the voices.
Paul Atreides must die. For Kwisatz Haderach to rise. Don't be frightened. Don't resist. When you take a life, you take your own.
Now in this vision, he sees Jamis killing him and losing the duel, but this is only because this vision is showing the death of his child identity, the Atreides heir that his father wanted him to be, but instead replaced by the Kwisatz Haderach that his mother raised him to be. Chani, thinking he'll lose, arms him with the Chris Knight that he has been seeing in his visions, empowering him with a tooth of the Shai-Hulud, and making him realize that this is the guide he has been destined to follow. And the mentor from his prophecies, Jamis, guiding him to this point, is really a barrier to the next step that he has to take in his maturity into a man, a barrier that he must now destroy. And the fight goes down pretty quickly. Paul, abiding by the combat rules he learned on Caladan under his father and his father's swordsmasters, tries to force Jamis to yield, but the Amtal is a fight to the death. And so his destiny as a Kwisatz Haderach is to take this life, a life for a life. And that is what transforms him into this Fremen, a being who belongs in the desert,
I understood that when it happened.
the Muad'Dib, and he chooses his path.
My road leads into the desert. You can see it.
And as he joins them into this march in the desert, he sees one of the Fremen surfing the Shai-Hulud,
Desert power.
fulfilling what his father actually hoped to gain from this planet.
On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power.
And in the trail of the Shai-Hulud, the Fremen follow. What was once a sure sign of death and a reason to flee, like a shark fin in the water, is now their path to follow toward freedom and toward life. New Rockstars does breakdowns of everything you love. So you can support New Rockstars by checking out our merch options at newrockstarsmerch.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EABoss. Follow New